If you are interested in finding out what these following health issues have in common, heart attack, stroke, cancer, high blood pressure, liver disease, pain, arthritis, neurologic diseases, you clicked on the right channel. Hi there, I'm Dr. Cori Stern, and welcome to my show, Take Control of Your Health. I have a wonderful, amazing guest today who's going to talk about what possibly can cause all of those conditions that I just mentioned. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Nelson Bulmash. He's a chiropractor, naturopath, and nutritionist, and he is the creator of a health show called Health Matters, which is widely distributed on TV stations, radio, and social media. So welcome, Nelson. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to enlighten us. I know that I'm going to be learning something today as well. So,
Cori, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And I'm going to discuss with you, I think, a topic that in the next months to years will be one of the hottest topics in healthcare.
That's very fascinating. You mentioned something to me about uric acid before we hit the record button. And, you know, in all my years I've been working as a natural doctor for 21 years. And the only thing that I've ever monitored uric acid for is gout and kidney stones. But according to what you're telling me, there's a lot more to it. Yeah.
Cori, there really is. And it's funny because most doctors pay almost no attention to uric acid. If somebody doesn't complain of having kidney problems, kidney stones specifically, and gout, mainly in the big toe, nobody really pays attention to it. This compound was thought to be an inert, nitrogenous, meaning nitrogen-based compound that was of little value. Today, it's considered quickly becoming one of the superstar molecules or compounds at the seat of regulatory mechanisms in the human body. Wow. As you mentioned, it is related to diabetes, increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, obesity, arthritis, liver damage, chronic degenerative diseases. They're finding now that it increases your heart attack risk if it's elevated by almost 40%. In adolescents between the ages of 12 and 19, 90% of the kids who had elevated blood pressure had elevated uric acid. It's turning out that they're finding these tremendous connections. And one of the things I'm going to tell people later in the show to make sure they keep listening, because this is not a topic you want to miss. This is like when they discovered nitric oxide. This is like when they discovered cholesterol. This is like when they discovered the importance of monitoring your blood sugar level. This is an extremely important topic because it's at the very seat of regulation of so many biological functions in the human body that if yours is elevated, you virtually guarantee yourself, Cori, that you're going to have one or a multitude of the problems that I shared early on in your show.
Wow. Now I'm trying to think back to all the patients whose blood work I've looked at recently and wondering, I'm going to go review everything again. So how does it work, Nelson? What is uric acid exactly? Where does it come from?
Uric acid comes from three sources. One, from purines, and two, from fructose, well, from sugar, but specifically, I'm going to teach people who are listening that the real driver, the heaviest driver is fructose, specifically high fructose corn syrup. So you have purines, you have alcohol, and you have sugar, particularly the worst driver, high fructose corn syrup.
Yes, so I've talked on this show about high fructose corn syrup and how it causes liver damage and metabolic disease, obesity, and it's just poison, basically.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. So one of the things that happens is, and I'm going to start to tie this together so it makes some sense, I was asked a question, for example, because high blood pressure is critically related to elevated uric acid. And I had some people say, well, I don't have gout and I don't have kidney stones, doctor. I don't seem to have anything that would indicate that I have elevated uric acid. And I said, that's exactly right. That's why it's called asymptomatic hyperuricemia. Asymptomatic, the silent killer, it means that you don't have a lot of the symptoms. And so this is why doctors had so much difficulty tying it together. The problem is, for example, that if you have elevated uric acid levels, Cori, it does a number of things, one of which is it creates a lot of free radical damage to the vessels. That's very, very important. So it oxidizes the inner lining, the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. Now, when it does that, it knocks out of the game a very, very important molecule that most of us at this point have heard of called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is critical, Cori, because what nitric oxide does is it allows us moment by moment to change the caliber of the blood vessels. And so this damages the body's ability to dilate your blood vessels. By doing so, it means you get more blood to different parts of your body. So we're finding one of the big problems as we get older is we stop producing significant amounts of nitric oxide. So what do you hear most people that are adults say? I can't keep warm. My fingers are cold. My toes are cold. I'm always cold. That's in part because they have insufficient nitric oxide. And I'm looking here on my desk because there is a company called Berkeley Life that has these amazing strips that can actually tell you what your level of nitric oxide is. And by the time you get to my age, where you're 60, certainly well, in many cases, well beyond that, even in your 30s and 40s, we're seeing people with low nitric oxide. So you don't want to drink a lot of alcohol, drink or eat a lot of sugar. These people who drink whole glasses of orange juice, apple juice, or other fruit juices, this is very, very bad because it drives the production of uric acid. It's the biggest driver. We always thought it was, you eat a lot of beef, you're going to get increased purines, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, those are they form the nucleotides or the backbone of your RNA and DNA. So the helix is built from those molecules. And so a lot of the issue with uric acid comes from your own body. So if you break down cells, you're going to liberate uric acid. So if you have anything going on, you're severely injured, you have a chronic degenerative disease, you're going to be continually having elevated uric acid due to the presence of that condition or that disease. Now, we're talking about circulation here and high blood pressure. So if you wipe out or really help to nullify the nitric oxide production in the vessels, then the vessels stay more constricted, which means you limit blood flow, which automatically means you have elevated blood pressure. So we've got to restore nitric oxide. You can do that through supplementations like Berkeley Life, the company that makes a product called Neo 40. Those are excellent products to boost over time your nitric oxide levels. Then, of course, you can self-test to make sure they're in that range.
You cut out there for a second. What was the name of the product from
there's a company that makes a product called Neo 40, which is very good at raising
Neo 40.
Neo 40, which is very, very good at elevating nitric oxide. And Berkeley Life is my personal favorite company. They've actually been a sponsor of mine at one time or another. And they have a great product. They have a professional product, and then they have the non-professional. Both work very, very well. And unlike most other companies, what I really like about Berkeley Life is they sell you strips that you can put in your mouth to test for the presence of bacterial concentrations that produce nitrate from which nitric oxide is made. And so it's very transparent. You know that you're either making it or you're not making it. And I was one of those people. I have an autoimmune disease, and circulation has become a big issue. So it took me a year, Cori, to get my nitric oxide levels to a sufficient level, which was kind of shocking to the people of that company. But it took me quite some time to refurbish, if you will, the level of nitric oxide so I could get much better. Like now, all of a sudden, I'm back in the gym and I'm getting a pump when I work out. I wasn't even getting a pump. The circumference of my arm wasn't changing, Cori, from the beginning to the end of my workout. That was a real giveaway that my nitric oxide was tanked and I wasn't able to dilate the vessels to increase engorgement of blood in my muscles. So that's a big way that it increases blood pressure.
Well, and I'm so happy to hear that you're doing better. I know that it can take a year for people to recover, or even
Right.
longer, depending on how long you've not been well and how long, some people have a lot of nutritional deficiency, and it can take quite a while to correct everything so that
Absolutely.
basically you have to grow healthy new cells, and that could take months and months and months. I would imagine, Nelson, that smokers have an even higher risk because
Very, very good point, Cori.
Yeah.
Smokers have a really high risk because
Mhm.
two of the protective mechanisms that would actually naturally lower your uric acid would be glutathione and vitamin C. And you dramatically use up glutathione and vitamin C. You and I are big fans of using whole food supplementation. So I recommend whole food vitamin C. And this is something that dramatically gets oxidized by the presence of smoking or excessive uric acid. But for people who have a serious problem, glutathione, and I'm a big fan of liposomal glutathione, where they put the glutathione, the active ingredient, in what's called a liposome, so it breaks down over 8 to 12 hours every time you take it. So these are two ways. And then what people can do, and there are too many foods, so I won't go over each one, but anybody can look up foods that are safe. That you can Google this online to find out foods that are low in purines, so that you don't, of course, activate through your dietary intake the increases in gout or kidney stone formation.
Yes, what I recently had a gout patient come in, and he is also on dialysis. I'm guessing that, the uric acid was a huge issue for him. He's, very far gone now, but one of the things I wanted him to do was to start eating some good quality collagen. And he was afraid of the possibility of purines in there. And I looked at it very carefully, and it's actually low in purines. Collagen is low in purines. Yeah.
And Cori, one of the things that's very interesting is one of the ways you also elevate blood pressure with uric acid is, once again, it destroys the filtration mechanisms of the kidney. And in doing that, you're going to get greater leakage, for example, of proteins. And that's a sign that if you get a urine test done and they find proteins in your urine, you better check that out, because that means that the filtration mechanisms of the kidney are expanded, and now they're allowing molecules to enter through the kidneys into the urine out of the body that should never be there. Normally, urine should have a small concentration of minerals and water primarily. And so if you start having larger macromolecules like proteins in it, you know that you've had kidney damage. And one of the ways that uric acid does that is it oxidizes the small network of capillaries in the kidneys, so it begins to destroy them, and therefore also then it destroys the filtration mechanisms. And when that happens, another byproduct of that is you get elevated blood pressure.
Right. So a lot of people don't realize that, and I have a video about this on my channel, that the kidneys produce hormones that help to regulate blood pressure. And so the patient in question did have heart issues. He had the whole battery
Cascade.
I wish that he had found me sooner, but we're going to see what we can do to
Let me ask you a question,
him.
Cori, if I may. How damaged are his kidneys?
Yeah, I mean, they're in end stage damage. He's been on dialysis for a while now, and he's suffering a lot because he is spilling phosphorus, and it is causing severe itching of his skin, and it's driving him crazy. He can't sleep at night because phosphorus is literally coming out of him. So we're trying to, see what we can do to help repair, at least so he can sleep. That's step one.
Yes.
He can't heal if he can't sleep. Yeah.
That's so true. And I'm going to make a statement, although I'm going to be very cautious about how I say this. I know bringing up the word Russia right now isn't a fabulous thing. It gets the ire of a lot of people, but will tell you something. There is an interesting story that I can tell you if you're ever interested, that after World War II, there was a tremendous race for power and supremacy in the world from a military perspective, and therefore ultimately from a leadership perspective with government between the United States and Russia. They both knew that in essence, whoever dominated would be the top in the world economically, monetary, well, in terms of government supremacy and so forth. So there's a hidden story that wasn't talked about for many decades. And that I'm going to share that briefly because it's fascinating. And then you'll know why how I'm going to link it to your patient here, if that's okay. So there was a fight for power, for control of nuclear power and nuclear weapons that went on behind the scenes between the USSR and the United States. And this was not common knowledge. And I only know it because I have a friend who's good friends with the leader of the Russian peptide program. His name is Dr. Kavinson. Dr. Kavinson is an MD, PhD, and colonel in the Russian military. So what happened was that after World War II, the United States and Russia realized that whoever owned and dominated nuclear power would probably rule the world, because you could have nuclear weapons and you could have nuclear power, power to generate the power for cities and power to generate the power, for example, submarines and big warships. And so there was a problem that arose in the Russians. Now, I never heard this about the United States, but the Russians had a very serious problem. And that is, Cori, they didn't know how severe the ionizing radiation leaking through the protective lead lining was from their nuclear reactors into the submarine or into the ships. So they were losing a tremendous amount of sailors and submariners. So the Kremlin basically said, you're in charge of the scientists to solve that problem, and you're in charge, to Kavinson, to save these people. We don't want to be the laughing stock of the world if this ever leaks out. So he developed what's called the Russian peptides. And these peptides are unbelievable. Now, I'm not going to say you should use these to treat your patient, but there's some interesting historical side notes that I may want to mention briefly. For example, did you ever wonder why so few people died as a result of Chernobyl? I did. I thought, how is it that with that crazy accident, so few people died? Well, Kavinson spoke to my friend and said, that's because we came in and we used our Russian peptides to reestablish the health of these people. And they did the same thing until they identified that they needed to make a thicker lining to protect the submariners and the sailors from the ionizing radiation emitted from their nuclear reactors, wherever they were, in ships, submarines, or nuclear reactors. So they started using these Russian peptides, and they found some interesting things. One was that they were tremendous at helping to refurbish very severely damaged tissues, organs, and cells in whatever body parts. So there's not a lot more harsh and damaging to the body than ionizing radiation, particularly from nuclear reactors. So they started treating these sailors, and lo and behold, they saved many of them, and they ended up living normal, relatively speaking, normal lives. So I'm not saying you should or shouldn't use this on him, and I'm not promising anything, but I'm just going to say that the vascular peptides and the kidney peptides might be useful for a gentleman like this. It might help improve the function of his kidneys. Not guaranteeing it, not saying we're treating it, but it might be able to look into it for him.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it. So that's definitely something I'm interested in. I would think I had more than one patient that might benefit from something like that, as well as perhaps some of our viewers. I'll look it up and put a link with more information about it in the description of the video. I'm definitely going to.
Well, we kind of keep it hush hush. Because,
okay.
Well, I mean, we use it with our patients, but it's the kind of thing that right now isn't probably best to advertise too much because of what's going on between Russia, Ukraine, and Russia and the United States. So.
Well, now that you mentioned it, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very interested in seeing how it might help them. So I can have them reach out to me. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I would do it on the
Discreetly.
fructose.
Right.
Yes.
Gotcha.
You don't want to get too much of that attention. Now, I will say one more very interesting thing, and that is that this changed medicine. I want to share a quick story with you, Cori. So some years ago, there were 3 American scientists that received the Nobel Prize in Medicine for their discovery of telomeres. And the telomeres were greatly related to not only protecting your chromosomes, but in determining how many cycles of cell replications you could have so that the cells could replicate as needed. Well, the Russians found out about this and they got really upset. You see, they found that out around 1970, 72. They'd known that, not, in the, I think it was in the 2000, oh, I had the exact year, but between 2010 and 2015-ish, I think they discovered this. It may have been a little earlier, but it was after 2000. So they'd been doing this for 30 years. And they went, well, if you're going to give them the Nobel Prize for medicine, then you better give it to us because we've been doing this since around 1972. And they said, sorry, we only award 3 people. And then they pulled Cori, dropped the mic, held up the mic metaphorically, and they said, oh, and by the way, just so you know, not only did we discover this in 1972, but we know how to reverse the aging of the telomeres, and we can lengthen them so that a person can live longer. And our average animal trials resulted in an increase in life expectancy from 23% to almost 40%, and dropped the mic and walked off. And so those telomeres are endolutein vladinics that actually extend the telomeres so that you can have more cellular replications. And in all the animal trials, Cori, the average animal lived 23 to nearly 40%, like 38% longer life expectancies. And the Russians surmised that if the average person, yeah, so your dogs are even excited about
Sorry
this.
about that.
It's okay, I'd be excited too. They found that if the average person started these in a timely manner in their late 30s or 40s, or at a time where they were reasonably healthy, that the average person would live to be about 110 years of age based on all the animal trials.
I have heard about this, and I know there's technology for longevity, and I think that really we're supposed to be living more like 500 years, guys. But the toxic state of our planet right now makes that challenging.
Yes.
But yeah, but my goal for myself and for all of my patients is to live as long as possible and be as healthy and productive as possible while you're still in this body. So,
no question. And
yeah.
Getting back to uric acid, if with your permission, I'd like to mention a couple other things. One of which that it causes high blood pressure again. And we know that's a critical marker for heart attack and stroke risk, which are 2 of the biggest killers in the world, particularly here in the United States. One of the things that it does is it hijacks the 2 hormones that control stimulating or activating our appetite, which is ghrelin, and the second, which is leptin, which turns off your appetite. And uric acid shuts down leptin. So you lose the mechanism, number one, that shuts off your appetite. So you endlessly want to eat, which means you gain weight. And more importantly, not only do you gain fat, but you gain visceral fat, which is once again critically related to what? All things bad: heart attacks, strokes, increased cancer, increased chronic inflammatory diseases. So in studies with animals, they found that 90% of the mice that had elevated, and they could, of course, you know what they do with these poor mice, they genetically modified them so that they were susceptible to this. And they fed them a diet. My understanding is that maybe they, more than anything, they just altered their diet. So they gave them high sugar so that they produced high uric acid, which meant that they suppressed leptin, which meant their appetites never went off. They endlessly wanted to eat, and they got very listless. They really became inactive. What happens? They sit around and lie around a lot. They don't want to be active. So their satiety mechanisms are messed up. They don't know that they're really not hungry, because the more sugar you eat, particularly high fructose corn syrup, unlike glucose, it's regulated differently. So high fructose corn syrup doesn't have the biofeedback mechanisms, if you will, that insulin does. Insulin is controlled by, glucose is controlled by insulin and glucagon. And so their control mechanisms to make sure your blood sugar level is stable. Insulin does not control blood sugar levels when you're eating high fructose corn syrup, which is in anything from chips to candy to baked goods, etc. It's way cheaper than sugar cane. So
Right.
it's used much more extensively. And so
in the US, I don't think it's used in
it is not.
Europe.
Europe, you're 100% right. Very
Right.
good.
Mhm.
Cori, very, very good call. Yeah, it's used extensively in the United States because it's pennies on the dollar. Cane sugar is much more expensive. So it really leads to a tremendous obesity problem. What does that do? High blood pressure, increases heart attack risk, increases diabetes, increases cancer, decreases immune status. It does one more very interesting thing. It alters two hormones that are responsible for how you use blood sugar. And one is responsible for making sure that you burn fat, AMPK, and the other is AMPD. AMPD is great if you're a bear and you want to go into hibernation. So then it's fabulous, because then it makes sure you accumulate a whole lot of fat to make it through winters. Now, this is also important because most of us check, if we do blood work, we check CRP, which is C-reactive protein. I know that's a very, very important inflammatory marker. And what we now know is there's a direct relationship between high uric acid and high C-reactive protein. And of course, the higher the C-reactive protein, the more difficulty we have with metabolic syndrome, which is characterized by increased blood pressure, increased sugar, increased bad cholesterol, increased body weight, and insulin resistance. All of those are related and get worse and worse as uric acid increases. Yeah, so I just want to make sure I covered a few topics here. Yeah, AMPD is critical. It's considered, Cori, I love this, the evil twin of AMPK, because if we lived in cold climates, Northern Europe, Russia, China, Canada, Alaska, then you want to produce AMPD because it might save your life, right? If you're in really cold weather, then you want your body to give you the mechanism, eat a lot so that you gain more fat, so that you're more likely to live through a harsh winter. But most of us don't live in climates where we have to sleep outside or in a cave anymore. We're in controlled environments. So if you're in a controlled environment, you don't want to eat anything. And the biggest driver is what? High fructose corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup shuts down AMPK, the enzyme complex that drives you into fat burning.
All right. I'm taking notes, by the way.
That's okay. For example, Cori, they found that when people had a BMI of 23 to body mass index of 23 to 24, they were about 4 milligrams a deciliter of uric acid. By the time you get up to 27 plus, you're at 10 milligrams a deciliter of uric acid.
All right. So I am going to take a short break and give a shout out to my partner in truth. And after I'm done with that, we're going to tie this together and identify the most important actions that you need to take in order to make sure that you don't have high uric acid and that you have adequate nitric oxide for optimal health. So I want to talk about my partner in truth, HATS, which stands for Hardcore Awakened Truth Seekers Movement. And this movement was inspired into creation amidst hyper-political division in the past few years to get people away from polarization and bring people together across the political spectrum to the truth and a sense of community that allows us to move forward. This movement is making real strides in achieving this vision. As of today, I saw that they had over 108,000 followers on their Telegram channel. They now also have a blog at hatstruth.substack.com with great articles. I actually am a contributing author officially. I posted an article on there about cooking oil, and I'll be adding more to it. And they also have a website where you can buy their merchandise. I'm wearing my Hat's Truth t-shirt, and in all different colors. They have hoodies, and I have my Hat's mug here. So I'll put a link to all of that in the description of this video. Please check them out. They are a wonderful way of getting information that's true. So, all right, Nelson, I want to tie this together for people, because what people ultimately end up wanting to know is, what can they do about it? So we talked about taking glutathione and vitamin C, and you know, my favorite vitamin C, I like Standard Process brand because it's the whole vitamin C, and I do have a video on it. I do have a video called "Is there vitamin C in your vitamin C?" Yes. I can put a link to that video. So that is what I take, and I do take quite a bit of it. So vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. That is just one small component of the vitamin C molecule. And most people, when they take vitamin C, they're taking ascorbic acid. And that actually creates an imbalance when you do that over a long period of time, especially in high doses. You need all of the other components of the vitamin C molecule. There's a lot of other stuff in there. There's P factors and J factors and enzymes that help you absorb it. Right. So the Standard Process C has all of that. I'll put a link to that in my video in the description. And then glutathione. So I have patients that can't tolerate taking glutathione straight. So a couple of different things that I do when that's the case is I will put them on NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione. And I also take that myself. So I have a lot of that available if anybody needs it. I have good quality NAC. And I also use another product that is a glutathione precursor, and it has a very strange name. It's called TUDCA, T-U-D-C-A. And I can't even tell you exactly what's in it because it has a whole bunch of stuff that helps the body to produce glutathione. And one of the things that's in it is melatonin. So I have to take it at night because it actually does make me a little sleepy. Yeah, but that's one of my all-time favorite products, and I will put that in the description of the video as well. And then you love liposomal glutathione. Do you have a favorite brand?
I do, and Cori, if I may, I want to make a distinction, and sometimes my whole food friends screech at me a little bit when I say this. But I'm very pragmatic. If somebody has severe gout, they're in tortuous pain. What I have done for these people is I've said, listen to me carefully. You know how much I preach whole food supplementation. The body always wants genuine replacement parts. However, sometimes we have an opening that requires something additionally. I will give them, for example, a whole food, vitamin C, Cataplex ACP, Cataplex AC, test them as you and I do, using NRT for that to find out how much they need. And they usually, if somebody has severe gout, they'll need a lot. But I also do something quite creative, and it works highly effectively. I will also test them, Cori, for the liposomal C, curcumin, and glutathione. Sometimes they test for one, and often it's if it is only one, it's the liposomal curcumin by Numedica. Sometimes they test for all three. Once again, made by Numedica. Love their technology. Their products work extremely well in liposomal form and other forms. And sometimes they only test for glutathione. But if somebody's screaming because they have what's the equivalent of glass shards in their big toe joint, you want to calm that down as soon as they can. These people are in agony. And so it's very, very effective to make the distinction. We're going to give an antioxidant component to help reduce inflammation so that we can get them out of pain and educate them that they need the complete whole food source. Did I say that in a way that is agreeable to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've done that too. Of course, that's a way of using nutritional supplements as drugs without side effects. And
Yes, yes.
it's necessary to do that sometimes. And yes, I've done that as well. I've had a lot of gout. I've never failed in a gout case, actually. I have, but the first thing you have to do is take them off sugar, completely take them off sugar. Yeah. So that was the other thing I was going to say is, besides taking supplements alone are not going to work if you're still eating a high sugar diet.
Thank you.
Right.
And Cori, if I may, I want to reiterate one more thing, because really what it all comes down to, and then I'm going to give you the number that I told you about at the beginning as we were getting started in this is the number that you want to keep your uric acid levels at. You and I are big preachers, if you will, on the efficacy of really putting high quality food and beverages in your body. One of the things you see so consistently with people that have gout is they're big, and I'm not saying there's no place for grass-fed beef. I'm not saying that. Once upon a time, I used to do very, very well, particularly when I couldn't eat for 4 to 6 hours. Sometimes I get so many patients, I couldn't eat for several hours. So grass-fed beef was beautiful for me. I don't crave it like I once did. As I've gotten older, my digestive strength or potency isn't strong, so I just don't handle it as well. So I don't have it as often. Eat more seafood and chicken and turkey and things like that. But is to make sure that you're not eating a diet that's high in alcohol and a diet that's high in those meats, for example, beef, that are high in purines. Because, well, you show me a person with gout, I'm going to show you a person who generally drinks a lot of alcohol, more than they should, and eats a lot of foods like beef concurrently. And that's a landmine. So you want to really be careful. And there's so many foods out there that they want to know. You can Google the foods that are high in purines. Easy to find that online. They can do that. Make sure they're being cautious about how much they're eating. And, Cori, one of the things is that people will eat small amounts, but they'll eat small amounts of many foods that have purines in them. And that's a trap for many people. Secondly, they'll have too much alcohol with it. It's astounding during the COVID pandemic how many people told me they were drinking a bottle of wine a night. Yep. A bottle per, and some said, well, I drink more than a bottle a night. Yep. I'm not against alcohol in reason, and alcohol creates problems if you drink anywhere near a bottle a night. And one of the things that high uric acid does is the same thing that alcohol does, which is it destroys the liver. The number one cause for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is too much high fructose corn syrup. And it destroys the liver like alcohol does. Yep. So avoid the foods, Cori, high in purines. And of course the biggest drivers are alcohol. Foods like beef is one that for most of my patients, if they have gout, they can't even eat it. And then make sure that you're taking the supplements that are very effective. As we mentioned, glutathione, curcumin, vitamin C, these are really good at lowering it. And the last thing is the magic number. What is the magic number? I don't care if you're a child, Cori. I don't care if you're an elderly person. I don't care if you're a man or woman. I don't care what your political beliefs are, your ideological beliefs. The number is the same. You stay under 5.5 milligrams a deciliter. That's the magic number.
All right. Well, I haven't had blood work in a while because I'm not symptomatic and I feel good, but I think I'm going to go check my uric acid after this. And
Cori, forgive me, I interrupted you. I apologize. I want to be cautious how I say this. Many people like you and me don't necessarily have blood work as often as we should. And I'm changing my belief humbly with regard to that, because this is a silent killer, asymptomatic hyperuricemia. This was something that nobody until recently, there was a doctor, Dr. Haig, Scottish physician in 1892, who discovered this. He found it was related to nervous system issues, migraine headaches, diabetes, high blood pressure. And when he got people off of purines and lowered the uric acid levels, these problems all seemed to disappear magically. And that's how he was the first person to tie it all together. Now more and more researchers are going about this inert nitrogen-based waste product. Maybe it's much more critically related to regulating our physiological systems than we have any idea. And now there's a tremendous amount, and I'm looking for something. Hang on one second, Cori, doggone it, where I have the cover of this. Well, it's here somewhere. This is a book. If anybody wants a reference, this is a very, very good read. The book is called Drop Acid by David Perlmutter. And I apologize, I have the cover here on my desk and I don't, Cori, can you see that?
Yep.
So this isn't the original cover. Here it is, hang on, I got it.
And we can put a link to this book in the description as well of the video.
I thought I had it.
It's all right. Well, I'll put a
yeah.
link. I'll put a link
Yep.
to it in the description of the video.
Yeah, it's got a real cool, and of course, it's a catchy title because in the 1960s,
Yeah.
he talked about drop acid as an LSD, and he makes
Right.
a joke about that in his introduction, that of course it has nothing to do with dropping LSD, but dropping uric acid, which is the acid that is critically related to all these regulatory imbalances if you get above 5.5. For the record, the perceived level for men used to be 7 and 5 for women. Now the new value based on all the research coming in is that everyone should stay 5.5 or below. Interestingly, Cori, if I may, I started going back and looking when my autoimmune issues were the worst. When my uric acid was above 7.
Wow.
Way more pain, way more inflammation, higher blood pressure. My blood pressure was ridiculously elevated. I'm thinking, what is going on here? And I've been lately looking at all my old blood values. When I had no blood pressure problems, I was 5.3. When I had hypertension, I was at 7 to 8 plus for my uric acid. This has become fascinating for me.
Do the when the labs measure it, have they changed their reference range, or is it still for men showing like up to 7 is normal?
Oh, even higher than that. I want to say they may go up to 8 or 10. They may go up to 10.
Okay.
But Perlmutter's a very good author. He's a really good speaker. And what's interesting about him is he shares something in common with us. He's a neurologist, which we have some understanding of, but he's also a nutritionist. So he looks at how things impact your neurology and how they impact you from a nutritional perspective. And so he is in a very, very unique position, Cori, to look at, through Western medicine eyes, specifically neurology, and through all the new and wonderful findings that you and I find through nutrition.
Yes, I'm familiar with his work. That's fantastic. All right, and I'm probably going to be getting that book too. I wish it was on audiobooks so I can actually do 2 things at once, because that's how my life rolls most of the time.
Well, I don't think, Cori, I don't think you have to wait long. And by the way, what's fascinating is I was praying one day not long ago, and I just thought, I'm missing something big. I'm not tying things together. And all of a sudden I hit a link on my phone, and all of a sudden, are you ready for this? How serendipitous is this? The power of prayer. All of a sudden I said, I recognize that voice. It was Dr. Perlmutter being interviewed by another famous doctor about the release of his book, Drop Acid, on that day.
Oh.
The first interview. of him. Now that's only, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago. I mean, the book was just released.
Oh, okay. All right.
So,
I didn't realize. Okay, well, yeah. So obviously, God assigned you to deliver this information
yes, yes.
to all of us.
And
So
so as soon as I heard it, blood pressure, obesity, increased heart attack risk, stroke risk, cancer, I went, that's the magic link that I have been looking for. And when you read all the studies that he cites, it's going to light you up and you're going to say, oh my goodness. What's the moral of this story? The moral of the story is this: always look at the world with new eyes. Too often we get caught, Cori, looking at the world like, yeah, I know that, I know that, I know that. You mentioned what I just said about uric acid. Most doctors are going to go, Cori, what are you talking about? We use it as an almost insignificant marker to determine what's risk for kidney stones and gout. Almost no one has any idea. When I heard it, I went, this is a message from source. I need to read it. As soon as the book came out, I ordered it and I've read it and reread it and reread it. And by the way, he goes into all kinds of things to help you lower that. So it's a fabulous reference source for this conversation.
okay, fantastic. I'm definitely going to be getting that book right away. And I'm feeling that what you're saying is critically important. I really do. I like, sometimes you just know when there's truth in front of you, right?
That's how I heard it.
Yeah.
It was literally an hour and a half before I had a major show. And I just went, boom, this is truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I ordered the book immediately. And when you start reading it, you're just going to go, that's how that's related. That's how that's related. That's how that's related. That's how that's related. And then you see a picture like a giant puzzle with many pieces now put in place. So you see the fundamental picture of what the puzzle is as a picture.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you sharing this information with me and with, all of us, everybody watching. And I want to offer anybody a virtual consult if you get some blood work and you see that your uric acid is not where it should be. I'm very happy to do whatever I can to help you with it. I'll be gaining a lot of experience in this area, I'm pretty sure, in the upcoming weeks, because I'm going to be looking at it with all my patients. So thank you again, Nelson, for this very enlightening talk. And we'll have you back on the show again very soon.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, Cori.
See you guys very soon again with more important health information. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, can you do that now? Because it makes me really happy when I see more people are getting this important information. And most importantly, please share this with anyone you know that you think would benefit from it. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.